We last met on the flight that was delayed going to Chennai for Samunati event.
Yes. Again, we are meeting in Samunati and Satwa event.
Hi Kuldeep, pleasure to connect with you as well. Hi Ravindra.
Hi, good evening, everyone.
Sorry, Meera, you're on mute, Meera.
I said I was just trying to get the background right. I think it took me an extra minute. It's not a mirror, this thing, right? Ojas, is it correct and aligned? Yeah.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Pleasure to welcome you to this webinar on enabling FPO development as well as member farmer development. We'll just give it maybe a couple of minutes for more people to join in. I understand more and more people are joining in across the Zoom link. We have LinkedIn Live going on as well as the YouTube Live links going on. So we'll maybe just give it another minute before we officially start this.
Sure.
Okay, I think we should start. I think good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for taking time out on a Monday afternoon of your busy schedules to attend this very important event on this topic that we're having, which is really enabling smallholder farmer development as well as FPO, farmer producer organization development in India. Very warm welcome to everybody. And my name is Ojas Malpani, and I'm going to be your host for this evening. We will be having two panel discussions today. Just wanted to let everybody know, please, if you have any questions, please do keep putting them in the question and answer at the end of every panel discussion. We'll maybe do like a 5-10 minute roundup of a few key questions that we will answer over there. A quick note on both the host organizations. Samunati is India's largest agri-tech enterprise and is on a mission to create an open agri network to unlock really the $1 trillion opportunity of Indian agriculture and smallholder farmers. Samunati works across the value chain, with multiple stakeholders to really make agricultural markets work for smallholder farmers. Satwa Consulting is a social impact oriented research, strategy advisory, and implementation firm. We are a mission driven organization focused on scalable solutions for social impact. To really kickstart this event, it gives me great pleasure to really welcome my colleague, Ms. Meera Harish, to really provide and set context for this entire discussion and give the opening remarks. Meera is a partner at Satwa and leads our entire work with corporates and CSRs, and has been super critical for us to actually organize this event and really get everybody on board over here. Welcome, Meera, and over to you.
Thank you, Ojas. Am I audible?
Yes.
Thank
yes,
you, Ojas, and good evening to everyone here on the Zoom link as well as on LinkedIn and YouTube. Thank you, like Ojas said, for being here on a Monday afternoon with us on this important topic. We are here actually in some sense to discuss what I'd call is a frontline worker of a different kind, right? We are so used to the word frontline worker these days, but I think the farmer in several ways is a frontline worker, working on his land to provide all of us with, healthy and nutritious food that we eat. And therefore, in several senses, the importance of this discussion today and the next 2 hours. Also, the fact that we're discussing a sector where 50% of India really depends on this sector directly or indirectly for its income, which is agriculture. And not to forget the fact that India is the second largest producer of fruits and vegetables in the world. And hence, how important and how wonderful is it that we are starting off 2022 with a discussion on a topic like this. Just to set context, and I'll take just maybe under 5 minutes, the world has about 500 million small and marginal farmers, of which over 350 million actually reside in Asia. And we know the numbers for India. One significant part of the 350 million are in Asia. And which is what makes India's farming context very, very unique. The fact that only 15% of the farmers in India are really, middle to large scale farmers. And the 85% of them are really small and marginal farmers. And to top it, also, they are some of the poorest people in the country. So when you look at it like that, it just, it makes you just want to pause and say, just be grateful that we are here discussing this today. Be grateful for everyone in this ecosystem who over years has been doing the kind of work that they've been doing in agriculture and for the small and marginal farmers. Just to talk for a couple of minutes on the reasons why small holdings are unviable. Just a few, there are several. A smallholder farmer really has no access to resources or services. There is really no technology that provides a reasonable livelihood for a family of 4 or a family of 5 of a farmer. Farmers have no bargaining power. Supply chains, like we know, are very, very heavily mediated and not at all in their favor. The cost of capital is way too high. There is hardly any ROI. So in all cases and from all directions, the small and the marginal farmer really at such a disadvantage in this country. And hence the creation of the FPOs in India a decade ago, after the experience that we had with cooperatives and some successful experiments, both in industries like milk and sugar, etc. The next experiment was with FPOs. And I remember hearing Pravesh ji once, talking about this and how far we've come in the last decade. And the creation of the FPOs really to drive economies of scale through aggregation. The role of the FPO, when you move from the smallholder farmer and come to the FPO, the role of the FPO is also manifold really, but let's talk of, let's say, the 3 or 4 important roles that an FPO plays. One is, one of the most important ones is really lowering the cost of cultivation by aggregation. The other is trying to facilitate a higher price realization by driving, demand-driven production for farmers. Providing financial stability, an important topic for today as well. And I think there'll be a lot of discussion around that. How do you provide financial stability to the smallholder farmer? And while it might not be something that is spoken about enough, the fact that you need to bring in innovative farming practices and work with the agri entrepreneurs and the agri-tech startups to see how is it that you can bring in sustainable practices into agriculture. These are all some of the things that the FPOs do for the smallholder farmer. And data shows that farmers who are part of FPOs, have about 40 to 60% additional benefits they get by being part of an FPO. Today's discussion will largely be around the challenges that FPOs face and the smallholder farmer faces. The challenges that FPOs face are several again. So every time it is really several challenges for everyone. The fact that they need to scale up the market linkages is not easy. It doesn't come easy at all. Supply chains, from farm gate to the point of consumption, we know in India are so fragmented and again difficult to kind of overcome in some senses, even if it's an FPO. Access to financial services, not easy at all, including something as simple as just professionally being able to manage their members. Doesn't come easy often, and there is expertise required there. Innovations, like I said, the need to fuel innovations and the challenge in being able to do that, which really means that the road towards growth and progress for the FPO is also riddled with potholes and challenges. Hence, the first panel, such an eminent panel that will really discuss the risks, the challenges, and the solutions that FPOs need to kind of look at, and also talk, I think, a little bit about how do you scale some of the solutions that have worked, how do you scale them? That will be the discussion of the first panel. The second panel will talk about CSR. So while agriculture is really not a topic mentioned in section 7, there are, and we know that several of the corporates in India, some of them on the call today, some of them on our second panel, do spend a fair significant amount of their CSR spends on agriculture, agri-related spends, but not significant enough at all. The likes of the Tatas, Mahindra and Mahindra, ITC, a Pioneer, ONGC, multinationals like Unilever, Pepsi, Coke, all of them do engage very, very significantly with small and marginal farmers, but still it's in some sense a drop in the ocean. So the second panel, moderated by Krishna, will really talk about how is the corporate's engagement with FPOs going, and what are opportunities there to kind of scale further and make a significant difference to the FPOs. So we really look forward to a wonderful next 2 hours of these two panels, and thank you once again for joining us today. Could I have Danish, please, let's play the film to formally kind of have the webinar open. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Meera. I think that was super helpful to set the context over here. Without further ado, I think what I do want to be doing is, I think, welcoming the first panel for the day. I think which really talks about solutions and aimed at smallholder farmer development, right? How do we mitigate the risk that smallholder farmers face, both as a result of agriculture, climatic risks, insurance, accidental risks, and multiple things. How do we mitigate all of these and enable greater farm income, right? And how do we make those markets work for smallholder farmers? As well as how do we will take that caveat and then go into how do we improve member farmer engagement within FPOs, right? Because the fact that ownership of FPOs and member farmers is such an issue, I think how do we really, we'll dive deep. I think the first panel will dive deep into that. Introducing a panelists, our first panelist is Mr. Anish Kumar, who is part of the management leadership team at Transforming Rural India Foundation. Prior to this, he was part of the leadership team at Pradhan, India's leading nonprofit working on rural transformation. His areas of expertise include creation of self-sufficient business organizations run by rural communities, as well as facilitation of participation of smallholder farmers in modern value chains. Mr. Anish has been a member of government think tanks working group on disadvantaged farmers and also been actively involved in designing policies on producer collectives. A pleasure to have you with us, Mr. Anish. Mr. Anish, you're on mute.
Thank you very much. You have been extremely generous.
Our second panelist is Dr. G.V. Ramanya Nelu, who's the founder and executive director of Center for Sustainable Agriculture. He works towards establishing models of sustainable agriculture, which are local, resource, and knowledge-based, as well as economically and ecologically sustainable. He's also worked with multiple livelihood programs and several government initiatives to promote FPOs, as well as support promotion of sustainable agriculture. Welcome, sir. Hope you're doing well and keeping safe. Great. Our third panelist is Mr. Balakrishnan, who is the CEO at Vritti, Livelihood Impact Partners. He's been part of Vritti's journey from the start, right when Vritti started working from its first farmer to today, when it provides farm services to across 100,000 plus farmers. Growing with the organization as well as managing multiple roles and responsibilities. Prior to Vritti, he was working with the Catalyst Group for over 17 years, and his experience spans consulting, research, capacity building, as well as implementing several development sector initiatives. Welcome, sir.
Thank you.
Our fourth and final panelist for this is Mr. Kuldeep Solanki, who is the CEO at Gujpro. Gujpro Agribusiness Consortium Producer Company Limited is a federation of 30 FPOs working in Gujarat. Mr. Solanki has 15 years plus of professional experience, during which he has worked with non-governmental organizations, accreditation agencies, as well as farmer producer organizations. Welcome, Mr. Kuldeep. Hope you're doing well. And finally, I would like to formally introduce the moderator of this panel, Mr. Pravesh Sharma, who has often been inferred with the title of the father of Indian FPOs, and today works to create a truly inclusive and viable agri-enterprise, leveraging the strength of farmer collectives to create an ecosystem, addressing the core needs of farmers for capital, technology, and markets. Pravesh ji is a board director at Samunati Agro and is also the chair of the steering committee of the National Association of Farmer Producer Organizations. Prior to this, he was the founder CEO of Kamatan, an agri-tech startup to create inclusive supply chains. Welcome, Pravesh ji, and I would like to formally hand it over to you.
Thank you so much, Ojas, and thank you, Satwa, for co-hosting this with Samunati. Thanks especially to Meera ji for her excellent contextual opening. I think we are meeting at a very, I would say, critical point. The union budget is due tomorrow, And those of you who had a chance to at least see the headlines of the economic survey findings will perhaps recall that agriculture for a second year running, a second pandemic year when almost every other sector of the economy went into negative territory, agriculture has ended FY22 at 3.9% growth. That's actually quite phenomenal. It was 3.4% last year. It's 3.9% this year. And it shows the immense resilience, the immense supporting power of the sector, which, as we know, hosted millions of additional working labor that went back, especially in the first lockdown, that went back from the metros to their villages and ultimately fell back upon agriculture for their livelihoods. But we also know that for reasons which are very briefly covered already in the excellent opening remarks of Meeraji and the small presentation, that this macro figure hides a lot of pain. And the so-called is not evenly distributed. It's not certainly distributed evenly in terms of value or wealth. A disproportionately large number of producers who are smallholders or even marginal producers are not participating in the real benefit of this growth. And that's why I think today's subject on addressing risk, the holistic ecosystem of risks, how is this to be addressed, especially through the intermediation of an institutional intervention like the FPO? And quite correctly, it was stated by Meeraji in her remarks that the whole basis of constructing this institutional platform was to address risk primarily among smallholders. So, of course, it's pleasure to be moderating, which basically means I'm the timekeeper for four very, very distinguished and experienced people, and it'll be a challenge to get everything out of them in the tight time limit. So I'm not going to speak very much, but I'm just going to maybe pose, shall I say, a framework for our four panelists, and you'll have about 10 minutes each. So thank you, Satwa, for also making this, I think, respectable time window for at least each panelist to come out with their core learnings and understandings. And as I have understood agriculture, I see the risk distributed in three major buckets. One, as we all know, is the biotic bucket, the entire weather, natural resource, and production-related risks. The second I call the abiotic bucket, which is the entire ecosystem, finance markets, labor markets, commodity and product markets, the institutional framework, cooperatives, FPOs. And the third, which I think is sometimes not addressed, certainly not by market players, is what I call the life cycle risks. The entire challenge that any human being faces, but especially that a farmer faces in his personal life, as he grows up, sets up a family, the day-to-day risks on the farm, and the framework in which he addresses those risks. So the biotic, the abiotic, and the life cycle risks. I would request each of you, and it's, I'm sure, not possible to address all three of them in your remarks, but I would like each of you to dwell at least on one or two of these buckets and share your thoughts on how these are currently being addressed and what could be done, especially as we are talking with our focus on smallholder farmers. So could I first invite Anish to share his thoughts with us? And if you'll forgive me for being rude, but my job as the timekeeper will mean that at 9 minutes, I'll give you a little hint that you need to wind up in about a minute. So Anish, over to you. Thank you.
Well, I try to be brief, sir. And so in some ways, the categorization you did, biotech, abiotic, and life cycle comprehensively captures the context of farmers. It is a bit ironic, but that 10,000 years back, when we started on settled agriculture, as Yuval Harari puts it, we became, actually wheat enslaved us rather than the other way around. And then it became a source of livelihood, sustenance, income, and civilization. And now we are talking of it in a risky proposition. And I am sure, Rami, you will have a lot to say how it can become less risky. I was there, and absolutely you are right, sir. Today's economic survey actually shows a year-on-year increase in agri GDP. And what Miraji said, she has set the context. But just to highlight one point, when we say small and marginal, actually we invisibilize the marginal, which is 90% of that number that Miraji said is marginal, which is less than a football field. So we then understand the complexity of the challenge at our hand, and also why we need a variety of institutional forms and formats to aggregate. What is the farmer seeking, sir? The farmer is seeking, life stability, livelihood stability, resilience there, and mobility. And mobility would come with capital technology, and there would be downsides to it. And that's what they would like to de-risk. And if we look at, so if just one parameter, if we pick credit, and if we are looking at again a year-on-year target of 10% increase, we are looking at 18 lakh crore. With bullish market prices, we still have close to 1/5 is, NPA. And if we were to look at indebtedness, the AIDS survey indicated among all the categories, 40 cultivators were the highest. And the average debt of the cultivator was just a little less than twice to that of the non-cultivators. Very high debt to asset ratio, the survey indicated, if you adjust for the, illiquid assets like land. So if overall, if one were to just look at this parameter, you would need some risk mitigation, because that's the productive asset, farmer has. And now if you look at the insurance, the way, FDI limit increased to 74%, now with COVID and the attendant risk, no longer it is a push, it is becoming nudge. All the 57 odd companies are massive presence here. But then, in spite of IRDA regulations on rural and social sectors, the penetration is extremely low in rural areas. And I talk of all the biotic, abiotic, and the life cycle risk. It's one of the most least insured segment of our population. So I guess we need a new business model and a new kind of product. And this would require, a combination of things. And first and foremost is doing some kind of, we don't understand marginal farmers enough. We need to understand it in terms of protection gap analysis. We need to understand it in terms of what kind of risks she faces in her entire life cycle, including the economic and production life cycle, and how it could be mitigated. Right now, it is mitigated by some cash savings, which is not there. So it leads to assetlessness, leads to indebtedness. And if we were to look at it in a comprehensive manner, we would necessarily one is the research and product creation is required. The other end of it is a very unique challenge we have in India, where, now with COVID and non-face-to-face interaction, digitalization, there is increased, because of variety of regions, increased diversification of the portfolio, livelihood portfolio, and need for personalized product creation, simultaneously with high moral hazards. So you need actually something on ground. And that's where I would see FPOs coming in, which would solve for this kind of a challenge that we have, moral hazard at one end, and the other end, face-to-face interaction. So that is the second point that I would say. Third, and which we realize much less, is in the recent CEW study, almost 74% of our rural districts were found to be vulnerable to various kinds of climate risks, drought, flood, cyclones, and stuff like that. So if you were, and they estimated in the last decade close to 5.6 lakh crore was loss on account of these. And if there was some way of looking at mitigating that through some kind of a premium, it would, I guess, count financially and much less. So basically, we are looking at increasingly, fragmentation of factor condition, increasing risks both on the factor and the market side. And we are looking at life cycle. And with COVID and all, we understand that environmental risks are increasing. So we would need some kind of a bundled kind of a life and livelihood stability, protection, resilience, whatever manner we need to call it, a kind of a product. And without that, I guess we will have a real challenge. In some ways, Annadata is, and as Miraji put it, they are the front line of our food sufficiency as a country. So there, some kind of a effort like that, and a comprehensive way of looking at the entire life and livelihood cycle would be critical for us to make stabilize their, both life and the economic situation. So I'll stop here.
Thank you, Anish. Thank you. That was so focused, and thank you for keeping well within your time window. And I think you've given us some great leads. I especially liked your characterization of the farmer's diversified livelihood portfolio as a very intuitive risk mitigation measure that she's undertaking, because in the absence of any formal instruments to protect her, this is perhaps the most sensible thing. It's very interesting. I began my career as a civil servant in Bastar, now 40 plus years ago. And one of the first tasks I was given on arrival was to go to Abujmar and do a paper on shifting cultivation, because the government wanted to, quote unquote, eradicate shifting cultivation because it is so injurious to the environment. And I spent 2 months, trekking all over Abujmar to come to the realization that it was one of the most efficient economic and ecological management systems that had possibly been devised. It had social insurance built in, it had livelihood insurance built in. It was quite amazing. And thankfully, the government's efforts at eradicating failed. Even now, it's practiced in a very sustainable way. So thank you so much for those points. And thank you also for reminding us that this Annadata has brought this country, which could produce only 50 million metric tons of food in 1950, to a point where last year we produced 300 million metric tons of food. We have a challenge in storing it, right? But that 6-time growth has not resulted in a 6-time growth in their income or in any other parameter, especially of the segment we're talking about. And that's going to bring me to draw Dr. GVR into, he heads this institution called Center for Sustainable Agriculture. And GVR, I'd especially like you to address this biotic risk area, but certainly not limit yourselves to that, because that's your core competence. And do share with us your thoughts and experiences on how we could, look at more modern ways of addressing these risks. Over to you, Dr. GVR.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your kind words. One of the things, whenever we talk about risk, we also need to simultaneously talk about the vulnerability. Because not every family has the same level of vulnerability for the same level of risk. So there are risks existing over there. And then vulnerability of the families also varies. So how do we also support most vulnerable is something we need to look at when we are trying to look at covering the risks. Second thing, when we talk about again the risks, there are certain inherent risks in agriculture which cannot be addressed through only production and business. Production and market cannot address some of these risks because of the inherent nature of agriculture itself. So let's say, for example, the cost of cultivation of most of the crops are increasing, and then the prices are not commensuratingly increasing. It won't increase forever, kind of thing. So we need to look at how that kind of inherent risks can be covered. And second kind of risk is the large area risks. So risk which happens in a larger area because of the disasters which we are seeing, particularly which have increased because of the climate change. So the kind of droughts, the kind of floods, those kind of things. Then comes the seasonal risk. So the insurance can cover only the seasonal risk, whereas the other two risks, which are the inherent risk, which is there in agriculture, as well as the larger area risks which are happening, and then whose frequency has increased significantly, both also needs a coverage, which is not the case today. So we don't have, while there is a policy on disaster management, we have seen that not implemented properly. And many times, say for example, in Telangana, we had to actually move to court for implementing the disaster compensation for the drought, which happened 2 years back. Till now, nothing happened, even after High Court ordered the state government to pay the kind of thing. So how this inherent risk management, seasonal risk, and then the large area disaster risks can be covered is something which we need to look at as a policy. Second important issue, particularly when it comes to the seasonal risk, largely it is to the crop failure. So it's a if it happens on a larger scale, there is a particular way of assessing that. Today we only have this drought code, which is written some years back, and then which is not any more relevant today. So we need to revise that and then come up with a kind of new code on how to identify when there is a disaster happened, and then how do we compensate that quickly. Because today the cycle, if you look at the identification of the crop failure and then the compensation payment under any of these drought or floods, it takes more than a year. And many times it is not even paid. And coming to the crop risks, which happens during the season, crop insurance, the unit of insurance is very large. In say in Telangana and Andhra Pradesh, we have seen that it is more than a block. So unless a failure happens on a large scale, it is not going to, farmers are not going to get covered under that. So we need to also figure out how do we reduce the unit of insurance. Unit of insurance should come down smaller. So the unit of estimation which can be covered. Similarly, whenever it comes to insurance, we were doing this analysis on the crop insurance in Andhra Pradesh and Telangana for last say 7-8 years. What is happening is that without reducing the risk in agriculture, expecting that it can be covered through insurance is not going to happen. So when the risk is very high, your premium goes up. So when the premium goes up, when the share of state government is very high, states are refusing to pay. So for the last 2 years in Telangana, the government moved out of PMFBY, and it has not created any alternative structure. So they moved out of one insurance scheme which is existing, and they have not created any alternative insurance model. So farmers in the entire state are not covered under the insurance. So when we talk about this seasonal risk to cover, first and foremost comes in how do you reduce risk in agriculture. So risk comes from economic risk in terms of increasing costs. So there is significant increase in the cost of cultivations which is happening, and at this rate, no market price is going to compensate the prices. And if there is a failure, then the risk for the farmer is very high. So we need to focus on reducing the cost of cultivations by shifting towards more local resource-based agriculture models. Second, very important is the climate change. The way weather is fluctuating, and then the larger climate change is happening, the risk of crop failure has increased significantly. So in that scenario, we need to have a new ways of dealing with the production practices, and then increasing the soil organic matter so that the water holding capacity can increase. So all our approach earlier was about increasing productivity. Now it should be de-risking agriculture and then having a long-term sustainability. So the fundamental shift in the way extension system should work has to change, which has not yet happened. And another major important issue when it comes to the insurance or credit or any of these risks is that how do you identify actually farmer? That is also one of the very critical ones. Say today, crop insurance coverage is only about 30%. So around 30-35% of the farmers get crop insurance. Only 30-35% of the farmers are getting covered under crop insurance because they are the only ones who get the credit. And the access to credit is based on the land patta. And farmers who do not have land patta cannot apply for credit. So credit, if they don't get credit, they don't get insurance. Because largely crop insurance in India is a loan insurance. It's a crop loan insurance. It's not actually the crop insurance. So given that, how do we increase access to institutional credit for farmers is also very important. So how do you identify cultivators is very, very critical. Say recent report says in Andhra Pradesh and Telangana, we have nearly 42% of farmers are tenant farmers, and they don't have access to insurance or any of these things. Last 4 or 5 years, and then another important issue is when you are unable to identify the farmers, when government goes for say crop loan waiver, again it goes to the people who get the institutional credit. So all those small and marginal farmers who actually are the ones seriously indebted and then do not have, and who pay a very high interest rates, they don't get any benefit out of this one. Similarly, when Government of India introduced the PM Kisan, and many of the states like Andhra Pradesh, Telangana have introduced Raitu Bandhu, Raitu Bharosa kind of thing, they are also paid only to the landowners. So again, the actual cultivators are not getting covered. So given that, can we look at new ways of dealing with this problem? Because these are the new problems which are coming up and then which are increasing. So can FPO become a unit to look at how do we reduce risk in agriculture? So what kind of crops can be grown, what practices can reduce the, so entire extension system within the FPO can be managed. And then when the crop is insured, can we look at some of the examples which many organizations have tried out as a micro insurance? So if it is, the area is smaller than a village, it can be covered differently by the FPO. And if it is, the area is larger, then it can get covered under the regular insurance scheme. And then inherently the risk is already reduced, so premium can come down. So we need to look at a comprehensive approach of risk management, not just a crop insurance. In the comprehensive approach for risk management, crop insurance becomes one of the components. I think that's the approach we can look at. Second very important issue.
Sorry, you have about 1 minute.
Yes, I'm coming to that one. I'm coming to the last point. So when it comes to the production practices, I think that's the most critical thing which we need to look at. We were always driven by productivity enhancement as a driver. I think we need to look at how sustainability in agriculture can be looked at. And if that is the case, then many of the support systems should change, basically. So the way subsidies operate, the way insurance operates, the way extension operates, the way markets operate, the way procurement operates, all that has to change. Otherwise, say government today procures only rice and wheat, but we ask farmers to make a cropping pattern change. Government subsidizes chemical fertilizers, we ask farmers to increase their soil fertility, which is not going to happen. So we need a very comprehensive approach of risk management, which should also include all support systems to agriculture. Then only things are going to work, and certainly FPOs can be a very good platform to experiment this at a certain scale and establish some of these models, so that in future probably the public policy can take note of it and change. I stop here.
Thank you. That's really dot of 10 minutes, and thank you so much for these very rich, thoughts. I think you've really helped us to explore some of the broader dimensions, especially the abiotic and the ecosystem risks and how they could be addressed. So I'm sure that people may have some questions to you at the end of this. I'm going to invite Bala now, and I'm keeping deliberately Kuldeep as the FPO representative for the end, because I hope everything is going to converge on Kuldeep at the end. But Bala, as a resource institution that has worked with thousands of smallholders, especially in a very broad swath of both southern and central India, how do you see this whole issue of risk, and to what extent, especially in your remarks, if you could highlight your experience of the institutional intermediation of farmer collectives in helping to reduce risk. So could you please share your thoughts?
Sure. Thank you, Parvez-ji. And thank you, Satwa and Samunati, for this opportunity to share our experiences. I think when I speak about how do we reduce risk and for farmers and through the farmers producer collectives, I think based on the Vritti and the Catalyst Group experience is that we from the beginning, I think not one services which help farmers to reduce or farmer families to reduce the risk. I think you need kind of bundle of services which needs to be facilitated for farmers and farmers collectives, which is very, very important, because I may be good at something in agriculture or I may be good at in finance, but farmers or farmers producer organization require bundle of services at the ground level. But how do we build that ecosystem to reduce risk? I think very important. Where we are looking at it, the resilience building for the farmers producer organization and the experience is that, for the farmers is that looking at the risk framework into R4 framework, where we are looking at it, reducing the risk reduction. Yeah, how do we reduce? I think Dr. Ramu was talking about it, or all of us here talking about it. How do we reduce risk? Yeah, risk reduction, we are looking at it, and risk diversification. Risk reduction is about through how do we help farmers and farmers producer collectives to look at local sustainable practices which can actually reduce cost of cultivation, reduce risk in the farming. Yeah, and also looking at risk diversification, because we're all talking about how do we provide alternate kind of or diversified income source for every farmer or farmer families, where we are looking at a diversification of risk through the like it can be a poultry, it can be a piggery, or it can be a milch animal, or it can be a small ruminant, anything which actually provides them the diversified income sources. We are also looking at it, how do we do risk transfer? That's where I think we are talking about many of the insurances. I think thanks to Samunati and NAPCO and Shatwa has brought this another tasking, where it is how do we look at also doing various insurances, which is I think, but I'll also come about some of the challenges as well, because including crop insurances or for livestock insurances or life and health, because it's everything is important. One side you increase the income of the farmer. If anything happens to their life or the health, then everything goes to the expenditure they are unable to meet through the income what they generate. How that can be also supported. That's where we are looking at a risk transfer. And risk reserve, I think very, very important. How do we also help? But there should be a surplus available for them to save something. Yeah, as a collective and as a farmer families, how do we help them to also do saving? That also can help saving at the farmer and farmer family level. That can actually act as a kind of a shock absorber, which is about savings. I think I also interestingly found out when Dr. Ramu was talking about also on the crop insurances were not available. I think one of the innovative model which we did, I think many might have also tried, where landless laborers or the tenant farmers who's doing a cultivation. Yeah, we have done one model with the Canara Bank. Now previously it was Syndicate Bank. But we had faced the problem when we have to do the insurance claim, because they are not having their land in their name. But the loan we could able to facilitate, which is the Kishan credit card, which is the cash credit were available, but the crop insurance was a challenge. They're saying they cannot give no crop loan in this model, because they have to give, when they give crop loan, they need to be insured. That is becoming a challenge. Yeah. When I think, which is, I think, very, very important, how the producer organization, which we have been trying, but not very successful always, but there are signs of changes, where one is about putting a help desk, which is at the producer organization level, facilitating various schemes, which is available, including life, health, various insurances. One is from the departments, various departments are available. How do we make sure it is available for all the members? Not only facilitating, also it is required, these information needs to be available at the FPO itself, because most of the time when the member family is not aware about somebody has done insurances, how it can be claimed, I think that is where the FPO should have all the information, And when something happens at their family level, they are able to facilitate and make sure these benefits are get realized. I think that is a very, very important, where you can create a help desk where it is able to facilitate various social entitlements and schemes for the farmers. And one, I think, I'm not sure others' experiences, livestock insurances seems to be also a lot of challenges on the ground, which is we have been promoting in the risk diversification part, where alternative income source for many, many families, when anything happens to the animal, but many of the occasions we could not able to get the proper claims. Your doctor was not available to do a postmortem. All these challenges are coming in. Then whatever we have done insurance, the farmer is coming back and asking, at least give the insurance what the premium I paid. Yeah, if I'm not getting the claim at least. But we were not able to do that. I think how these can be avoided, and created a mechanism where FPO take these responsibilities and facilitating all these schemes which comes from government, which is in terms of our crop insurances or in terms of livestock insurances. I think, and also we are looking at it now, the credit life also, which was there from many institutions, financial institutions, but this is also getting withdrawn now. Recently, it has not become viable for them for at the FPO level. We are also looking at it, can we create FPO level or the federated FPO level, these mutual insurance products, where I think Dan Foundation has tried as a people mutuals, or Seva has tried as again people mutuals. Can we bring in various insurances which can be managed by the people themselves? I think for health, Uplift Mutual, which is our Annapurna Parivar, which is in Pune, they have been doing it for the health. Can we learn from all these models how the FPOs can actually facilitate for the member benefits? I think these are all, I think FPO can become a facilitator and managing all the risk at the pooling at the FPO level or the federated FPO level, and also facilitating the benefits to the members on various insurances. These are all some of the experiences from us. We feel, I think it needs to be done on the ground. Yeah, I stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, Bharat. Thank you for these very focused remarks, and that also, I think, helps me to now bring to the center Kuldeep. So Kuldeep, I deliberately wanted you to hear the other speakers, because all this burden of risk management seems to be now on the FPO shoulders, right? Of course, there are some very good initiatives, and there are some challenges. But speaking as a network organization of FPOs, do you think that the management of risk is among the top priorities of your institutional members? Or do you think that the introduction of modern instruments is something that they realize is today both inevitable and necessary to contribute to lowering the three buckets that I spoke about, the abiotic, the biotic, and the life cycle? So be happy to hear your thoughts on, especially the intermediation of this platform that we all have so much faith and have invested, both time and resources in. Over to you. You're on mute, Kuldeep.
Yeah, sorry. In fact, the very theme of the today's webinar, smallholding farmers. The smallholding farmers means it itself indicates that there is very little space for farmers to play. In fact, smallholding farmers with their limited land holding, they have to sustain their livelihoods in a way. And I agree with Mr. Balakrishnan. He said that diversification of risk and diversification of livelihood sources is very much required in this case. Like for smallholder farmers, in fact, in spite of intensive farming, or even if the farmers are kind of change in cropping pattern, even there is little scope for them to earn higher livelihood. So it is the best strategy would be to diversify their livelihood. Some farmers could either go into livestock, or some other kind of livelihood sources can be generated at the rural level. Another risk factor which in fact has been pointed out or might have missed, in fact, is the increasing cost of agriculture right now. Now, although there has been increase in the commodity prices over the years, at the same time, there has been a considerable increase in the cost of inputs, and even at the family expenses level, there has been a considerable level of increase in that. So in fact, the margin between cost and sale price has reduced, and especially with farmers which are growing oil seeds or grains or pulses, this margin is considerably lower than the farmers which are into plantations and horticulture crops. There, at that level, the surplus is quite higher than the farmers growing into other crops in that case. So that part is also needs to be looked in, and forms kind of a vulnerability for the farmer. Recently, there has been a considerable push towards organic farming, natural farming, and we are seeing that the options for pesticides and chemical inputs, the organic supplements which are coming in, which are equally expensive. So there is not much of a decrease in the cost of farmers. So that aspect also that needs to be looked into reducing the cost of agriculture. So in this case, when we talk about smallholder farmers and forming an FPO of smallholder farmers, these aspects also needs to be looked into very closely. So, for example, if we take an example of a FPO with 500 farmers, smallholder farmers, I see a clear scope that a farmer can easily generate, an FPO can easily generate a business of 100 to 150 lakh rupees. Means they can easily negotiate with input companies and actually contribute in reducing the input cost of farmers. At the same time, there is a huge gap in terms of market information. Now, every farmer has a mobile phone and can get information from market regarding agri input prices, means what is the commodity prices in the nearer market. But still, the gap of information pertaining to which crop to grow, like considering that last year the commodity prices of certain commodities like chana and soybean were very high. So farmers automatically switch to those crops without knowing that means that all farmers will be growing that crop, and certain contracts have been removed from the future platform, trading platforms. So it is expected that this year the prices will go down. Instead, if they had opted for any other crop, which actually this gap could be filled in very well by the FPOs by actually analyzing the micro and macroeconomic factors, context with the crops, and guiding the farmers that which crop they should grow. Actually, this is a big gap right now. In fact, in the last 2 to 3 years, which I've been seeing. So this is the place where FPO could intervene in that case. And the other parts is like soil degradation. Like actually over the decades, the productivity has increased because of introduction of improved varieties of seeds, expansion of irrigation facilities, crop care technologies. But on the flip side, there has been soil degradation because of increased use of chemical fertilizers and pesticides. So FPOs in this case could actually take up, like Ramanjal, you said, it plays an important role in promoting sustainable agriculture practices. So in that way, the use of chemical pesticides and fertilizers could be reduced, and how to reinvigorate the soil health. That part the FPOs could play. And market linkages, obviously, with the size of 500 farmers, they obviously have around 1,000 to 1,500 metric tons of produce to sell. So with proper market linkages, if they establish with market players over a period of time, if they increase their capacity and establish proper market value addition facilities, obviously the income of farmers could grow in that context. But at the same time, I would like to also point out that the FPO's capacity, we have been discussing about FPOs since a long time. We also need to focus on enhancing the capacity of the FPOs, because even FPOs face some of the challenges. Like FPO is an instrument of solving some of the key vulnerable challenges and risks faced by FPOs, but at the same time, how can we strengthen FPOs to actually fill in this gap? Currently, with most areas in most FPOs, we are facing challenges with respect to their sustainability and all that thing. So in that sense, what I feel is that at current, a lot needs to be invested in enhancing their capacity and know-how about markets. Also, I see that the situation of smallholder farmers is quite fragile. So factors like small land holding, poor productivity, poor access to resources, poverty, and related factors are also attributed to smallholder farmers. Similarly, an institution of smallholder farmers is also can be fragile. So many farmers organizations fail after the initial support ends. And one primary reason is failing to instill the right kind of leadership in the organization. Although we try to instill strong systems in place and develop sustainable business model to ensure that the organizations run smoothly, leadership does play an important role in the survival and growth of an organization. Hence, nurturing good leadership in an FPO becomes very important. At the same time, another biggest issue is less equity and hence less capital formation. Like when we talk about smallholder farmers' inability to contribute more to the equity of the organization is a real fact. The amount of equity contribution can also be attributed to the motivation of the farmers to join the FPO. And this emerges from the leadership's ability to articulate a strong problem statement of how the FPO will address the key challenges faced by FPOs, the current market gaps, and the risk faced by FPOs. So that has to be strongly communicated to the farmers, and that confidence between the leadership and the farmers has to be built in order for farmers to engage properly with the FPOs. And at the same time, with limited resources at hand and limited capacity and know-how, the ability of the FPO to absorb losses in the business during the initial phases is less. Also, the fact remains that an entrepreneur, when an entrepreneur starts a business, he has the know-how and he has the capital, and he has that much capital to sustain himself and the company till he reaches the break-even point and achieve viability. But in the case of an FPO, we need to strengthen them in that sense that flexibility is not there in an FPO, because the capital is risk and their risk-taking capacity is also less because of several factors as we discussed. And this actually increases gradually with exposure to market by strengthening the management and control systems of the FPO. And when we talked about farmers' risk to seasonal risk and risk faced during natural calamities, actually with insurance also, what we have experienced here, like we tried to sell it through the FPOs here, insurance. But the fact remains that without the government subsidy, the premiums are very high. In context of Gujarat, where Gujarat has been receiving the highest amount of payouts since the last several years. Hence, in some districts, the actual premium hovered from in like the Rajkot and in nearby Junagadh and Sabarkantha district, the premium was actually around 40% of the actual payout, actually sum insured amount. So that's very high, and government used to subsidize the remaining part of only 2% had to be paid by the farmers. So even right now, while designing products for the FPO, they look at historical data and the payout data. So what we are seeing is the premiums are very high when we remove the subsidy component. And then secondly, if the insurance company does not perform, means if they do not pay out in case of calamities or natural disasters, or when there are losses, in fact, the impact has to be faced by the FPO, means that indirectly impacts the business of the FPO. So we had tried to sell such insurance products through our FPO, but we thought that it would be better to actually directly link with certain agencies who are already.
Wind up in about a minute, Kuldeep. Sorry.
Yeah, sure. Sure. So this is means FPO obviously can play a key role in addressing most of these challenges with respect to reduction of input cost, increasing the income of farmers, reducing certain risks and vulnerabilities faced by farmers. But it has to, at the same time, the FPO has to be function efficiently and effectively in the interest of farmers, and hence their capacity has to be built over the years. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I know that you have such rich insights, and you have been dealing with these issues now for a number of years. Thank you so much. You have brought out and illuminated the whole range of challenges. I agree, we perhaps don't have answers to everything, but it's equally important that we are aware of the entire range of issues. And I think I couldn't add anything to this panel's rich contribution. I really need to go back and listen to the recording of this and derive, I'm sure, several learnings just from more than the notes I've made. And I think I will not take further time to summarize anything. It's very self-evident what all of you have spoken. There is obviously a need to devise, and I like Bala's characterization of this whole challenge as requiring a bundle, neatly composed bundle of several interventions. It's obviously not one silver bullet solution. So thank you all. All four of you have really helped to really enrich the session. And I hand it over back to Sattva for the next program. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Excellent insights.
Thank you, everyone. I think this is very, very rich and insightful for everybody here. I especially like the fact that I think when we look at FPOs, we generally only look at aggregation from a income crop point of view, but also from a point of view of aggregation of multiple services that we can offer, important services that not only sort of benefit farmers, but also help increase the member farmer engagement within the FPOs and sort of build that gap, right? Praveshji, I will ask and I'll call on you again. While we are looking at, I think just a couple of panelists also did touch upon the Annadata Suraksha Abhiyan program, right? I think so. I'll just give a quick introduction, and then maybe I think we have a small video. And Praveshji, if you can again come in and give your inputs over there. So just wanted to take 5 minutes and tell you all about the Annadata Suraksha Abhiyan program, which is essentially what it translates to is freeing our Indian Annadatas, Indian farmers from risks on the ground, right? Which is an ambitious initiative, joint initiative between Samunati as well as NAFPO to really launch and to create a nationwide platform for enabling insurance to smallholder farmers across, and as well as their families, right? Across India, right? I think given that we've talked so much about risks and insurance, FPOs as a mode of providing these services, maybe we quickly just have like a small video of what the Annadata Suraksha program is all about. And Praveshji, if you can then come in after that and highlight some of the things, I think that would be very helpful.
I am Dr. Ranade. I am working as an expert director with the Bandhutva Farmer Producers Company at Maua. Altogether around 15,000 plus farming families we are connected. So this Annadata Suraksha, as our farmers would get benefit out of this. So it was a really good move from your end. And similarly, when we inform the farmers, now we are covered with the insurance. They say it's a good. This also helped us in promoting Bandhutva. देखो आप बंधुत्व से जुड़ गए, so now this additional benefit you are getting.
வணக்கம், என் பேர் சுதா சுப்ராஜ். நான் மேலப்பட்டி விழுதுகள் உழவர் உற்பத்தியாளர் நிறுவனத்தில் பங்குதாரராக இருக்கேன். எங்களுடைய வாழ்வாதாரத்தை உயர்த்த விழுதுகள் மூலிமா எங்களுக்கு சமூக நிதியிலிருந்து இன்சூரன்ஸ் அப்படின்னு சொல்லிருக்க ஒரு ஸ்கீம் இது பண்ணி கொடுத்துருக்காங்க. அதில் 12 வகையான இது அடங்கியிருக்கு. எங்களுடைய வாழ்வாதாரத்தை உயர்த்தி கொடுத்ததுக்கும் எங்களோட உழவர் உற்பத்தியாளர்களுக்கும் சமூக நிதிக்கும் நன்றி.
Pravesh, if you could maybe just come in and tell us a little bit more about how this was conceptualized, what has been, how does the scheme and how does this program really work? I think that'll be very helpful to all the participants, because I know that a lot of the questions have been around how can FPOs look at playing a role over here.
Thank you, Ajay. So, friends, if you recall the three sets of risks which I set out at the beginning of our panel, which is the biotic risks, which are natural resource related, weather related, production related. The second set are what I call the ecosystem or abiotic risks, the markets, capital, technology, institutions. And the third, what we spoke about, were the life cycle risks faced by the farmer. Annadaata Suraksha Abhiyan is a small attempt by Samunati to address this third category. We've heard from the panelists in the last session how various experiments have been tried by the government, by banks, by some donor agencies, by NGOs in addressing production-related or market-related risks. That's work in progress. Some of them have worked to some extent. There are challenges in upscaling them. But we at Samunati felt that while we are too small a player to address risks related to farming, that is agriculture or production or market-related risks, while of course in our work, we do work to address those risks by supporting FPOs, by offering capital to them as working capital or term loans, by helping them link to markets, which is also one way of addressing their risk. But the pure risk faced by the farmer as a person and his life cycle. So when we started looking at the data, we were quite surprised that there is a very high rate of either death or disability arising out of accidents which are on the farm. And the government data suggests that something like 330 farmers per lakh of the population suffer from some form of farm-related accident risk. This could be anything ranging from snake bite to being gored by a farm animal, to being crushed by a tractor, to being electrocuted, snake bites. It's a whole range of risks faced by the person, the farmer. And we also know, given the key position of the farmer as normally the primary livelihood earner, the primary income earner of the family, the either death or serious disability of the farmer has a huge cascading effect on the entire fortune of the family. So Annadaata Suraksha Abhiyan is our attempt to try and de-risk the farmer, the person of the farmer, and eventually also cover his family from any accident which can lead to either death or disability as part of his agricultural operations. We do realize that the model that we are trying to promote, which is that we offer this instrument as a free cover to FPOs that are part of the Samunati network. To sustain this, we need to really build this into kind of a movement. And that's why we want to sensitize both corporates, employees working across companies, even in the public sector, citizen at large on the key role that the Annadaata, our food provider, plays in our lives. And, as I mentioned at the beginning of this session, even in these two pandemic years, agriculture has kept that sector going. It's the only sector of the economy that has consistently clocked positive growth. And today's economic survey presented in the parliament says that 3.9% growth was recorded by agriculture in a year when the other two sectors barely recovered from their first pandemic year losses. So obviously agriculture starts at a much higher threshold compared to the other two sectors of industry and services. Now, how can we as individuals, as citizens, as corporate employees, as business leaders support this program? And that is what Samunati and Sattva have come together to do, to try and take this message of the essential nature of the farmer. Maybe all of us can do without eating a pizza for 6 months, and nothing would really happen to us, or maybe having a cold drink. But you still would need at least 2 meals a day for a normal, healthy life. And given the challenges that occur in the entire production cycle, which we are not aware of, when that lovely looking roti or a bowl of rice is in front of us at our mealtime, we're not aware of the kind of risks that the person or the farmer, I'm not talking about, as I said, the production or the market related risks, but simply the dangers that the farmer exposed himself or herself to in helping us access that food. So Annadata Suraksha Abhiyan is our attempt to try and give back. And we are trying to, in fact, the product which has been devised is unique in itself. Samunati acts as a master policy holder, and the policy coverage is issued by our FPO partner to the member. It's a very simple process, and the claim settlement also is made very simple. Maybe we can talk about that a little later in the program. And we believe that this is a great platform for both CSR support, donor support, and ultimately we hope to go to the government with some data in a year and a half to 2 years' time, and to be able to convince policymakers that something of this nature needs to be incorporated in the larger policy framework of risk management for agriculture. So I'm going to stop here and hand it back to Ojas. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think this is very helpful. I know we're running slightly delayed, so we'll quickly move on to the next panel. Our second panel of the day is again very interesting. I think what we're looking to discuss in the second panel is really discuss the role of corporates at large as well as CSRs in really aiding the development of farmer producer organizations as well as the development of their member farmers over there, right? Like, how do we enable the development for smallholder member farmers over there? Our first panelist is Ms. Garima Singh. She is the lead for corporate responsibility and sustainable development at Cargill Seeds across South Asia. She is responsible for Cargill strategic communication and has also played a vital role in building and managing relationships with key stakeholders and driving meaningful impact in the field of food security, nutrition, sustainability, as well as community development. Interestingly, she's also the co-founder of Digital Sathi, an initiative by Cargill, which is an application that aims to improve livelihoods of small and marginal landholder farmers by providing access to information and advisory services across weather, crop practices, pest and disease management, as well as reliable access to market price data. Welcome, Garima. Hope you're keeping well. Okay. Our second panelist.
Thank you so much, Ojas. Sorry, I was on mute. Thank you so much.
Our second panelist is Ms. Aman Pannu. She heads corporate communications and CSR at DCM Shriram. Ms. Pannu has worked on communications across industries, including chemicals, retail, alcohol, as well as agriculture. As part of her role, she has been actively working with communities and the development sector, local administrations, as well to make sustainable social impact. At DCM Shriram, Aman creates impact through CSR in terms of livelihood, health, care and sanitation, environment, as well as education. Our third panelist is Mr. Ravindra Sharma, who is currently the vertical head of the Agri department at Bajaj Allianz General Insurance. He is one of the key driving forces for successfully executing rural insurance programs. Ravindra has also been the founding member in conceptualizing and developing and global award-winning farmer-centric ecosystem app called Farmitra, which is again a first of its kind offering from the insurance industry to the farming community at large. Farmitra currently has more than 5 lakh farmers across India, primarily utilizing its 23 plus features across agri and crop insurance value chains.
Thank you.
Welcome, Ms. Aman, and welcome, Ravindra. Hope you're doing well. Finally, I'd like to invite the moderator of the panel, Mr. Sri Krishna Sridharmurthy, who is the co-founder and CEO of Sattva Consulting. Over the last decade, Krishna has been actively working with the leadership of global foundations, social enterprises, as well as corporates to design and scale their social impact initiatives. Welcome, Krishna, and over to you.
Thanks a lot, Ojas, and what a wonderful discussion since morning and a great initiative on the insurance campaign. And Garima, we thank you much for your time. Pleasure to have you on this particular panel. We've heard a lot of interesting insights from all the esteemed panelists before this, and a lot of points that Parvez you also talked about, both the risks that are there, from the farmer community. And also the need for strengthening the value chain, the capacity of that ecosystem very strongly, and it's very interesting to see there's a lot of digital initiatives already kind of at play, which means there is something that can be done at scale and in a little more effective kind of manner. So we seem to have all the tools, but somewhere we need to kind of bring it together and do it at scale, because everybody seems to have tried something, knows what needs to be done. And there's clearly an opportunity for more collaboration and more innovative thinking, from that perspective. So I want to start off with that, saying it's great to have, people with that diverse set of thinking and mindset to kind of work together. So what will be great to probably touch upon in this panel, and maybe Garima, I'll invite you first, to share your views, is how does a company or a corporate think about working with the agri, especially the small farmer ecosystem. There's obviously the FPO story, which I think is exciting, and that's kind of blending to a lot of value to the ecosystem. So how do you look at it? And given that also it's also an important part of your value chain at Cargill. So it's not just a one of the CSR projects that you do, it's actually important for the sustainability of business in many ways. So from that perspective, how important it is to build the capacity, engage with this value chain, what have been your learnings, and more importantly, can you inspire us with some success stories?
Thank you so much, Krishna. No, this is wonderful. I mean, I'll begin by saying that for me also, I've been with Cargill for the last 5 years. For me also, it has been a beautiful journey to explore how really a corporate could contribute in this space, being a food and agri company, which of course, farmers is the largest customers of ours and also a part of a value chain. We've been doing a lot of different initiatives across the globe, doing several things and as a part of corporate responsibility program. But back in 2019, at India leadership level, there were these discussions happening to look at some of the opportunities for companies like especially into food and agri business. How could they really support the farming income or farmer households, and those were the discussions. And also from a business side of the thing, I'll be very honest, and not just the farmer livelihood. We know the farmer livelihood is very, very important, but how could a company like Cargill could contribute? So all these discussions started to happen back in 2019. We decided to come up and we tested and tried and read a lot about AgTech in India, how it is growing. We know there are about 1,000 registered AgTech players working in different fields, different streams, but we wanted to work as Cargill. We wanted to utilize the capacity that Cargill has. The fact that we are available in end-to-end supply chain, why cannot we try and experiment something to put a digital aspect to it as well? So having worked in country for such a long time, we decided that we know this market very well, and how could we add to those advantages of doing things with the farmer. So we kind of started working in the place called Davangere, and this is a place where we also have a wet corn mill plant. That's one information apart from the overall geography. But we started working in this geography also because we were working with about 5,000 farming households as a corporate responsibility program. The program was called Project Sati. And this program was primarily working, we worked for about good 7 years in that geography. We understood the length and breadth, and it was an extremely deep engagement model where we worked with about 25,000 3,000 individual in about 27 villages, working on agri-diversifications, working on multiple things that how we could include women in the farming business, and a lot of components in that program. But there was a logical progression to the program. And when we were thinking all of it, we were like, we're kind of stuck when it comes to a physical intervention. We just almost can go to X percentage of a scale up program by investing into X%, right? But if you have to really look at a faster growth in the kind of work we are doing, we have to do something digital about it. And that's how entire digital Sathi came into being. We thought of having an entire initiative where we could play in end-to-end value chain, where we talk about pre-harvest, harvest, and post-harvest. And we also kind of did a dig deep into what are Kargil expertise in each of these elements. Now, it is not, and it's very surprising, it's not just Kargil expertise in one aspect, when the fact that we could say we could work in end-to-end is we could support a transportation, we could support a procurement, we could support the call center services, and so many such. So it's been a good journey so far. We kind of launched the Digital Sathi platform in February of 2021. And we right now have over 23,000 farmers registered in that region. We're working in about 5 different districts. We've recently launched, while we had an ag advisory services where we're still experimenting. I'm not going to say that we are absolutely doing amazing, but we're still experimenting that how digital ag advisory could benefit a farmer, how bringing in a digital ag input marketplace or an e-commerce platform will help a small landholders. Would they want to access it? So we did a lot of desirability testing, viability testing. We've done all of that. In this phase, we are currently launched the e-marketplace. We've also opened up channel for FPOs to come. So we partnered with about 15 FPOs in that region already. And we're working with them in and out to help them work with the farmers for a demand aggregation. And once the demand aggregation happens through a digital platform, we are kind of helping them to connect with the buyers. Now, one of the buyers is definitely Kargil, but this platform is not restricted to Kargil. We are trying to help and reach out to all the other buyers in that region and also understanding the challenges. So I'll take a pause. I'm not going to get into the challenges phase, but I'm just going to say here that while there are so many challenges, and when we entered into this, it was like, oh my God, what we've gotten into, very honestly, because it's an extreme complex structure, especially agriculture in India, we're all aware of it. But we're still finding success at each stage. We're still finding that the farmer may be reluctant initially, but is willing to invest their time and effort to understand what is it. So, and there will be, I think, next 5 to 6 years in the country like ours, where there will be a progression, where your farmers will be willing to use digital as a platform and trust this more and more as any other platform so far. So that's the success so far, Krishna.
No, that's very encouraging, Garima, to hear that the digital solution or the digital approach is actually kind of landing where we wanted to land, and then hopefully will expand from there. And it's also heartening to hear that that the changing farmers' mindset, and Davangere is the place I know. Sridhar sir here from Samruddhi will also kind of relate that we work together, Samruddhi and Sattva. On that place, and there are FPOs there that you are able to engage and kind of change and work with them on changing their mindset. I'll come back with more questions, Garima. I'm just going to bring Aman now, and Aman, I've seen with your leadership a lot of passion for agriculture and working with the farmer ecosystem, and you all do a lot of programs around it as well. So what has been you work in a different region as well, it's a different part of India, which is the Uttar Pradeshs and the Rajasthans, and what are some of your learnings and challenges again? What is the direction that you would like to take your FPO story at this point?
Thanks, Krishna, and good evening, everyone. So, Krishna, I want to share a business model analogy here and how that learning, so you're aware that DCM Shriram is in the agriculture space, and how that learning is something that we are putting into our FPO system also, right? Yeah. So, we've been talking about how FPOs leverage the benefit of economies of scale, right, for both production and marketing. And we're aware that, this is basically to enable more efficient production and naturally the price discovery that we talk about. Now, if we take these two as the key pain points when we were talking to the farmers and say that there are many, many more sub challenges that the farmers go through. So the illustration that I want to talk about is the sugar sector that we are in, right? Now, when we work with about 2.25 lakh farmers, which is covering about 1.65 lakh hectares of farmland, and this is in our catchment area in UP, in Hardoi and Lakhimpur Kheri, and they are mostly small and marginal farmers that we talk about. Now, you're aware that sugarcane is one of the only crops where there is a direct linkage that exists between the farmer and the miller, and there is no middleman. So he gets direct payment, he gets a timely payment, and the farmer gets an SAP, which is a state advised price. So the market linkage part is something, as a pain point is taken care of. The second pain point, which starts at the beginning of the life cycle, like Pravesh was talking about, is the entire production efficiency. And this is where we, about 10 years earlier, we started a project on sustainable sugarcane, which is called Meetha Sona. And for this, we partnered with IFC and Solid Aridad. We have about, say, 300 farm extension workers. We created about 10,000 demo plots. And this, along the way, what we were trying to do was solving many challenges which kept coming up. So about sharing best sustainable farming practices or digital technology, or if it was about, say, custom hiring of machinery or timely inputs at a fair price, and getting specialist or collaborations for all of this. So because DCM Shriram cannot do all of this on its own. So we had organizations like Unnati or Rabobank or Rivalus, IISR, many of these coming together to create this program, right? And now these challenges were discovered because we had a very strong interaction with our farmer base. So we had our own agronomist or, the doctor saab that they call on the field, who would actually go and ask the farmers that, what is the problem that you're facing? Because if we are working towards one end goal, which is, okay, how do you increase your productivity? What all should we be able to do to achieve this end goal, right? And that is why I wanted to share this business analogy, because this is what helped us when we were doing our project. So we do a program under our CSR umbrella called Jeetega Kisan, right? And this we were doing in another geography in Jhalawar and Kota, where we were working with a much smaller farmer base. So about 900 farmers is where we had started this project. And we used our agronomic advisory practices, our strength in that area. And we implemented this program with ISAP and NM Sadhguru. And actually, this was a 3-year-long program, great extension work, great inputs that came, like in Jhalawar earlier, production of vegetables did not happen. That was something that started, we sustained the project well. We left where the production was at a high. We were happy with all of that. Now, when we went back and we said, okay, let's do an impact assessment, that what has happened here. So on impact assessment, we understood that, we left it at an FIG level, the farmer interest groups, and we did not federate it into an FPO. So the sustainability from the market linkage was something which got missed from our side, right? How does this happen on a regular basis? So now the project that we are doing in Kota with another 900 farmers, so we made sure that, when we've started our project, the FPO layer is something that we have added. And we are working with our partners. So we are saying that, listen, for each and everything that you're doing, wherever DCM Shriram can come in, support from our business can come in and do that. We'll be happy to get that. Or you have collaborations, get all of them together, right? So that the life cycle risk of the farmer is also taken care of.
Absolutely. No, that's very, very useful, Aman. And I think two very interesting things that you're talking about. One, literally going it in a mission or a program mode kind of an approach and creating a campaign around it and driving all partnerships and resources to kind of come towards a common mission. I think that's an interesting, way of thinking about it. And two, also, thinking about sustainability of these initiatives, right from the beginning, and not doing it in a little bit more of a piecemeal approach, but actually thinking about it both from a design and sustainability perspective, I think is also critical. One question to both you and Garima before I bring in, Ravindra. what recommendation would you have for corporates who are thinking about using their CSR money for the agri ecosystem, right? And especially, you can say if a corporate comes and says, I want to work in the FPO, space or in the small farmer space, what advice would you, based on your experience, what advice would you give that corporate?
Okay, Aman, may I go first?
Please.
Yes. So I'll say one thing which is purely by experience. We're working with 15 FPO, not just in Karnataka. We're working with few more FPOs in Orissa and Andhra Pradesh right now. And one thing which has come very, very, clearly is the risk-taking capacity of the FPOs today. And we've seen that even if they're formed as a farmer producing company, they do not have a risk fund to get themselves covered if they incur any losses in the output business. So you see a lot of these FPOs will actually end up working in input business, in advisory business, but they will not very openly enter into an output business. That's something that we have experienced in multiple geography, and that is because if they are enter into it, and if their one truck gets rejected, who's going to pay for the loss? They will not really see that if 5 trucks get accepted, they know they've made money, but if one rejection, who's going to pay the loss? So I believe overall there is the risk-taking capacity, which in a CSR sort of a program, corporates should look at building capacities of these FPOs via giving them a working or an operational capital, which help them cover their risks. Number two, I will also say that a lot of FPOs do not have a required manpower that we need to do the business in these operations. They struggle so many times. They have people from their own villages, but who's going to do the dirty job on the ground? Who's going to go and meet the farmer, to the buyer, to the other corporate, to understand what's the logistics requirement, etc. So I think in that entire program, one should also look at how we could help them have a manpower requirement, identify who do we want, and how they can help in that entire output process. And finally, I think especially in output management, business of FPO, a lot of FPOs lack quality assaying capabilities. Especially in the crops where they do have to assay the quality of the crop before they actually sell it to the buyer. We are doing it all the time in the cases of maize, or paddy, right? So the quality assaying technique is something which is very missing, and FPOs do not have a capability, and often their material get rejected at some or the other counter because their product is not perfect. They probably did some local way of assaying their crop, but it eventually gets rejected. So top of these three things, I think emergency risk fund, personnel management, and quality assaying techniques can be part of the services that corporate can look into in providing building capacities of different FPC. And we have to handhold them for about 3 years, 4 years, until they're very confident of it. And with our experience, we've seen if we handhold FPO for 1 year in an output business, they're very much confident next year. So those are top 3 things as an advice.
That's fascinating stuff, Garima. What you're basically saying is, don't treat FPOs like NGOs, like you would do in your typical CSR. Treat them like enterprises. And you're talking now about all the business risks that an enterprise would have. And that's the bit of a mind shift that needs to happen even from the funder perspective. Though it's a social problem, your approach has to be enterprise-like, rather than from how a typical non-profit project would run in education or healthcare or other sectors. Aman, what would you like to add, to that list?
So I think, overlaps on some of the points that Garima has already said. But I think, as corporates or funders, it's very, very important that when we are looking at starting an FPO, look at research, look at a baseline. I don't think we should just get into it that, okay, we want to start an FPO, that's why we need to do it. And the point that Krishna, you made, I think looking at an FPO as a startup is equally important, right? And the example that I was also giving earlier, it becomes important that we look at all layers and what is it that we can do. Having a vision, I think is very, very important for the FPO, right? Some of the issues that Garima spoke about, where we talk about the HR perspective, because I think manpower is something which is a big miss in terms of rural areas. So how do you make sure that in terms of FPO, you have the right manpower, somebody who understands this and what is the need, right? So an investment in terms of awareness, capacity building of the board, of the position holders, I think that is extremely important. Cross-learning is something also that we've seen. As when we're running FPOs, it becomes equally important to go and see how FPOs are doing good things. It's not possible that you pick up one structure and that works in another geography, but at least learning best practices, I think, is also important. And as funders, we cannot just say that, this is not checkbook philanthropy, that we give the money and move out of it. So as corporates, if we have manpower, if we have volunteers, and like we're saying, if we are from the agriculture background, so we have specialists in our own organization who can actually help this, right? Convergence, I think, in developing all of this together. How do you get farmers, agriculture-related schemes together? Because I think that piece is also very, very important, right? And the interactions with the farmers is something which is key, because once you're going to have your communication on is only when you will be able to make this FPO more feasible. We have with our organizations that we're working on the field, we say that if you are having a meeting, we want to be in each and every meeting so that we can value add and tell you that, listen, this is a miss, or this is something that we know better than you do. Right? And those sort of collaboration convergences is where I think can make the difference.
Brilliant. Again, fascinating points. The data research part is very critical, because again, without that, you may be kind of a little bit, going on.
Krishna, your voice is cracking.
Understanding the dynamics of the ecosystem and having that. Okay, sorry. Can you hear me better now?
Yeah, better now.
Is this better?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, I was just saying the second point that, with the hands-on funder is very, very important in the agri sector as well. Getting your hands dirty and a little bit going to the ground. Good time to now bring you in. Obviously you're looking at it from the perspective of insurance products, which also means you must be studying markets a lot and understanding the dynamics of the market. So what is, we talked a lot about risks in the previous, session as well. So what would your, advice be? And first of all, what is your experience working in the agri ecosystem, and what learnings you have in working with FPOs from an insurance perspective? And second, would love to hear your thoughts on how philanthropy ecosystem can contribute, to the whole, agri insurance space.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you so much, Krishna, and Team Satwa and Sanmati, for this opportunity. I've had this opportunity to hear, from the biggies and, the actual contributor, in this particular segment. Although panelists, both the topic 1 and topic 2, their experiences and, the point to reach out to the problem statement that they have encountered and the interventions that they suggest. It's quite fascinating and it is quite interesting, to hear about. Bajaj Allianz as a company, we've been, interacting or, insuring farmers since 2014, and I have had an opportunity, to understand how the development or, growth of insurance as a scheme, from a government per se has evolved, from 2014 onwards, where, it was more of an, weather-based or maybe kind of a small segment population is to be get covered. Now, if you see when Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana got launched in 2016, the government had a plan of covering of more than 50% of cultivable land holding. Right now, they are at somewhere around 30-35% of land holding. This scheme, Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana covers closely around 5.5 farmers, in India every year. And if I talk about the propensity or the amount of claim that, as a scheme, all insurance companies have contributed is more than 1 lakh crore, which is quite, fascinating how the crop insurance point of view has been covered. This has evolved in such a way that, there are two major kind of risks that are covered. One is on the weather perils Second is a yield. So right from sowing till the harvesting, every aspect of the risk that is covered via these programs. The scale of, when we talk about scale of economies of such kind of programs, it's very high. That is why if you see many, like Dr. Ravi mentioned about, Dr. Rama, sorry, he mentioned about, states like Tamil Nadu opted out from the schemes. And there will be a lot of challenges even in Gujarat, what we heard from the first panelist over there was, where the state government are opting out from such kind of schemes because of the viability or, the premium that is there involved in that, in such kind of, enabling such kind of schemes. So it is very important, I would say from, from an insurance company point of view, how they determine the premium, bring in their kind of efficiencies, bring their kind of instrumentations to address the issues which are there, at the field level. When I talk about Bajaj Alliance, we have been, very closely associated with farmers. We, in the year 2019, came up with an ecosystem concept called as Farmitra, which is an ecosystem app for the farming community, not only just for our insured farmers, but also for the complete, community. We have over 5.5 lakh farmers who are right now enrolled. The app is live in 18 states in 8 different languages. And there are 23 functions, out of which 50% is devoted to insurance and 50% is devoted to, the agricultural advisories, crop diagnosis, locator services, and other information which we have, made, enabled in this particular app. And from a vision point of view, from Bajaj Alliance, general point, insurance point of view, is that we want to engage more with farmers. It is not about only insuring their risk, what they do from crop insurance point of view. It is also from other aspects, like, for example, this ecosystem that we thought about was, having a shared value concept of bringing all the partners. So it is not like only insurance organizations, the government organizations, all the farmers who can come. It is a conglomeration of all the stakeholders, whether it is a seed input dealer, whether it is an FPO, whether it is a supply chain, and everyone, and in this, the ecosystem will only succeed if there is a shared value proposition for each or every stakeholder. That's very important, having a shared value concept. So there have been, FPO is one of those approach where, FPOs on behalf of small and marginal farmers are coming together, bringing such kind of, farming community. And, some of points which I heard in the first panel was about, how ensuring a lot of informations, there are gaps in terms of understanding where, what exactly is insurance, how it can be covered at what level. Like, for example, if I talk about, insurances which are there, from an FPO point of view, there is a transit, there is a storage, there is a transportation risk, then there is an accidental to the health or life, then there is a loss, theft, burglary, institutional risk when it comes to, fire and, other risks. So some aspects which government is, some aspects which insurance as a company should also come forward and interact with these FPOs, explain them. The first major gap that I see is that, many of the FPOs may not understand what exactly is insurance. This is a pivot and a very basic issue with what we have seen, what farmers also think that, to an extent, say that it is a benefit policy. It's not a benefit policy. First of all, it is like if there is a risk, there is a loss that happened, then it is an indemnity policy. As per that, it's not life insurance as a policy, which many people say that at the end of season, if there is a loss or there is not a loss, I want claim to be paid. So it is not like that. That misconception has to be cleared, and FPOs would play a major role. I think in understanding more of these jargons and deciphering into a language which farmers also would understand over there. And also covering, financial aspects, if I look about, the viability of such kind of FPOs, which have been introduced a couple of years now, it is growing. If I think about the concept, it's a fantastic concept, where small and marginal farmers were not able to communicate or reach out to multiple, organizations. Having a consortium of such kind of, unit will definitely help the larger population, which is there, at the farming, which is the small and marginal farmers over there. So insurance company or maybe any, BFSI companies, if they come together, join hands together with some kind of FPOs and the farmers, bring in some kind of a module via which, risk as an instrument can be addressed, at the lowest of the level, would make a quite, difference to the community is what I think.
Wonderful. No, fantastic point on education and bringing that awareness to the whole ecosystem, because without that, it's going to be a challenge. Because with the whole climate change story going and so much of variation in the markets and the way consumer behavior always shifts, the risks are very, very high. And this is a sector which through the value chain, and we heard it talked so deeply in the first session, doesn't fully understand, at the unit level, what the risks are and how they need to be, kind of dealt with. So from your FarmMitra example and experience, Ravindra, are there some, outcomes or outputs you've been able to achieve? Any success stories that you can share?
Absolutely. I would say, when we launched this FarmMitra app in the year 2019 October, we had, one of the biggest challenge that farmers, in the field, in insurance fields face is they have to, to report a crop loss which has happened, in the field. They have to go to respective district office or maybe branch offices, or maybe call up a customer care, or maybe write an application and submit it to an insurer to report a crop loss, which was, very daunting process. What we did is that via FarmMitra, we made intimation such simple that within 1 minute, the farmer just enters his application number, sends what exactly is the loss. If there is an images available, he captures the images and submits it. As quickly as that, where farmers used to go to address the query to maybe, to an nearest CSC center or maybe to a government office over there. So as fast as that, and I would just say from an outcome point of view, today, though I have, 5.5 lakh farmers, on a monthly basis, there is an engagement of more than 11 lakh, sessions that are there, unique sessions, where, farmers are interacting with the app, the services, the information that is available, whether it is agricultural information or whether it is insurance related information. They are interacting with us in such a huge manner. We have close to around, 6 minutes of average time where a farmer spends on an app, FarmMitra, searches information about, best practices, what is happening in nearby vicinity, what are the government programs that have been introduced, how to, intimate a loss, or how to check the status of his claim. And more important from that, what we have recently tried to do is that bring in an employment opportunity in the farming culture also, community directly. Like, for example, if someone wants to, have a second source of employment or maybe generate a revenue, what we are saying is that we are trying to bring in insurance at doorstep at village. And we have, introduced a new channel called is Village Insure Network, where we have right now, we've started it this year itself. We have more than 6,000 Village Insure Network, advisors at the field, where they are helping the farming community from insurance point of view. So this, if someone wants to be a part of this, a group of, because they are the one, who understand what exactly is the problem in the field or what is the problem with the farming community. They being the face of a company, by being a part of VIN, Village Insure Network, it will be much helpful to the farming community over there. So we have, introduced this also in FarmMitra, where, people are coming up, they're saying that I want to be a part of VIN, not only as an employment generation point of view, but from servicing point of view, how we as a villager who are at a remote level can, get better accesses to the risk instrument which are available over there. So this is how, from an utilization point of view, FarmMitra has been amazing. We have been, adding more and more features. Maybe next year we'll be introducing more of artificial intelligence and machine learning capabilities in the app, where, farmers at any corner, wants to interact, and if they're not able to connect with one-on-one with any representative, can directly interact with the bot. So we are in process of development that a lot of things are happening, via FarmMitra that we are trying to achieve. And we want to bring in, we want to bring a lot of capabilities by bringing a lot of partners also. We try to do that, but, we are, under regulations of an IRDA, Insurance Regulatory Authority, where, we have to be very particular in terms of bringing what type of partners, whether it is transactional in nature or whether it is, financial in nature. So if we have been, in discussion with IRDA also to allow that. Once that happens, maybe, what we can, bring up like a super app where, all the entire, stakeholders, in this particular value chain of farming can be a part of it. And not only those, their family members also can be a part of it and can get reap a lot of benefits.
So both the collaboration and the ecosystem angle is very, very clear with what you're explaining, Ravindra, and also the fact that it's bridging the information gap, which I think is one of the very critical things that a lot of people talked about. Aman and Garima, if you want to also share your experience with engaging farmers on insurance products, whether you've done so and what your experience has been. It'd be great to get your feedback as well, and especially with the context of the risks that we talked about, right? How should farmers mitigate risk? And have there been any experiences from your perspective on that? Maybe Aman, you want to start?
So I don't have a direct example in terms of insurance, but maybe I can just add to this point by a live example where so this is on government schemes, right? And actually, the Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana is also one of the schemes that we were reaching out to the farmers for. So we work with this organization Hak Darsha, where they work with the beneficiaries to get access to government schemes. And this we are undertaken in the 18 villages of Kota, where we are doing our CSR project Jeetega Kisan with 900 farmers, right? So our focus here was to push farmer-centric schemes, right? And basically for efficient delivery of the services. And I think 2 or 3 learnings that came from there was that there was a feasibility of most of the government schemes were limited to the 3 major central schemes, right? So there was the Kisan Samman, there was the Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana, and there was KCC. And on the other schemes, which were investment-based, the farmers didn't want to come forward for them, right? There was more focus on, say, health insurance, pension, and these were what the farmers wanted to take up. And at the end of this particular project, we unlocked a value from about 1,800 schemes of about 1.3 crore, right? So I think, FPO's intervention for more value-based allied schemes could also help. So not only looking at just that piece on agri-related scheme, because of COVID, for example, there was a lot of focus where they wanted to understand that, now we need hospitalization, what can we do? So I think that piece is something which is, which I could share. Yeah.
No, very, very useful. And the government play here, Aman, is definitely something to keep in mind. Garima, anything you would like to add?
Krishna, I will say that I do not have today a lot of example where we've started supporting farmers on the insurance. We are still experimenting, and we did do some baseline and a bit of opened information data where farmers wanting to apply for insurance. What we have seen as a general trend in Karnataka is that a lot of these farmers are actually reaching out to the local traders, the big traders for meeting their insurance requirement. And we have been right now trying to address that gap only, right? And why farmers reach out to traders, and we know what kind of entire value chain and risk associated with it. So once a big trader gives the loan to the farmer in the beginning of the crop cycle, they are mandated to give their entire procurement to that one trader only for whatever price he quotes in the beginning of the year. So technically they never make any income at the end of the crop cycle. And this is extremely prevalent. I know the entire part of the country, especially in Karnataka as well. So we are still trying to work on that issue. Very honestly, we did reach out to FPO to take FPO lead in all of these things. And hence we keep talking about the risk mitigation fund that one needs to put as a corporate. Even in the CSR program, we need to put that fund so that FPO is capable of running their day-to-day operations and also can think of how they can support their member farmers. So those are some of the things that we're working on, but I do not have much of an experience on that right now.
Brilliant. And I think just getting FPOs to think about the risk and the corporates kind of coming in to support through philanthropy, an instrument like the risk mitigation fund, it could itself be a great start. I would imagine. We're kind of coming to the end of the session. What I would love for all of you to share, in as brief terms as possible is the most radical idea you have thought of in kind of supporting the FPO or the small farmer ecosystem, which you may not have tried, as of now, but it is there based on your experience, which you would like to, it's almost like a wish list, right? Saying if I had a magic wand, I would do this type of thing. So what would that radical idea be? Anybody can go first now.
So I would go, Krishna, I will take this opportunity. I would say that, I mentioned about having a super app, where, anyone can have that, ownership, maybe big conglomerates like, ITC or maybe big company. And we also, Bajaj, not just a general insurance, but as a Bajaj Capital, we are thinking of, bringing up, something like a super app, where what will happen is that every stakeholders, whether it is FPO, farmers, or, enablers like, all those who are there across the value chain of farming, they'll have to be a part of it. They come together and they contribute, towards upliftment of FPO and the farming community. Because if you see that, even the numbers that, Mr. Sharma in the first, session spoke about, where exactly we are, every year, even today, tomorrow, there is a budget, I am sure, there would be something for the agriculture sector also, where Nirmala ma'am would, say something about, and they have, one of the vision was, doubling farmers' income. So, how this will happen, everyone working in silos will not happen. Someone will have to take an initiative and bring someone together. Yeah. And someone will have to wear that hat of being a monitor and saying that, please come together and then, devote and contribute and make this segment as one of the best. Though it is good. One of the striking numbers there were, in last 2 years, this was the only sector which has, contributed to positive growth, and very fantastic growth. So there is enough opportunity. Everyone knows that. Look, like newest reform that is coming up, even, international organizations or countries, they also believe that, this is a sector, where there is a lot of potential. From insurance, I would say is that, more than 60% of population is still uninsured. I would say, from a territory point of view, where, it is a rural segment, and then there is a tier 2, tier 3, and then the metropolitan over there. So there is huge potential, depth of potential. So someone will have to come together.
We need a super app. Literally the superhero approach.
Yeah,
that's a great start. Garima Aman, who wants to go?
Maybe I can go next. I think one of the radical ideas, it's a very good question, Krishna, is, when we started working in this space, we were looking at creating a complete digital interface even for FPOs. And we did work on initial prototype and worked with FPOs to understand what are their requirements. So I think I foresee and I wish that at some point in time, and that is not too far, probably next 3 to 4 years, where every farmer producing company in this country at least have an access via one digital application where they can probably see each buyer and seller across the country. And there has to be some initiative and collaboration. And I am sure a lot of us here in the groups are already planning to do that.
Brilliant. Wonderful. Aman, over to you.
I think the business model thought is something which needs to be taken forward, right? So if there are institutions like, IIM, Ashoka University who are doing great work, is it possible for them to look at these FPOs and actually help them create this business model? Because currently also when we are going through this process, we don't know what is the strategy. How do you decide what the subscription rate is? And getting minds who actually can do this, I think will make that paramount shift that we're looking at. So that's my idea.
Brilliant. All fascinating stuff. And so basically we landed in people and technology, right? If we get our people and technology right, I think we have a lot of opportunity to kind of engage. And I think the radical idea of Samunati was the insurance campaign, the Annadata Suraksha Abhiyan that they launched. So kudos to everybody at Samunati. And thanks, Garima, Aman, and Ravindra for joining us today. It was absolutely wonderful to speak with you all, and thanks for sharing your insights. We look forward to continuously engage on this particular conversation. Both Samunati and Satpa very, very passionate about it, and you will hear more from us. But thank you so much for being here. And over to Ojas and Pravesh ji for the final thoughts.
Thank you, Krishna.
Thank you, Garima, Aman, Ravindra, and Krishna. I think this was a very insightful discussion that we had right now. I think I know we're running a little bit late, so and I know there have been a lot of questions that we may not have been able to answer due to paucity of time. So if I can please request either Danish or Shreya, one of my colleagues, to put in the email ID if you have any questions that you have from any of the panelists of either panels, or any questions that you in general have about this topic. please feel free to reach out to the impact@satva.co.in email ID, and we will get back to you as soon as possible. On that note, I think as we're coming to close, I think we just wanted to, I would like to call upon Pravesh ji to really look at and deliver some of closing thoughts and his insights from this discussion over here. Over to you, Pravesh.
Thank you. And really, this has been such a rewarding 2 hours, especially listening to the last session. And Krishna, though I was not part of the panel and I'm really misusing my closing comments, but I'm going to also put in my radical thought to add to the last panel's wish list. And what I've always felt is, and this is very contextual and relevant to what we are discussing today, I don't think, given the scale of challenges in agriculture, either the government alone, the private sector alone, or the farming community, least of all, alone, can address, a range of these challenges. So my radical idea is to see the government take the lead. And I'm going to give you 2 examples of where they have actually taken the lead, and we have a scale model to replicate. I'd like to see the government take the lead to set up a national risk fund for agriculture, which is started off with a pool of capital out of the budget, but is contributed to by the corporate sector. I'd like to offer corporates maybe a 150% write-off against every 100 rupee contribution they make to the fund. I'd like to offer individual households a right to invest in that fund and get a set off against their tax charge. We've done this in 2 major platforms. We've created a national investment fund, which, as you know, is only 49% government and 51% private sector owned. It's doing some fantastic work in raising resources for infrastructure, for investment in startups, in new age companies. We have now, as you all know, a bad bank, quote unquote, which is going to take off some of the stressed assets from the banking sector and allow the credit cycle to start moving again. There again, it's a collaboration between the government, public sector, and private sector banks. I'm saying agriculture needs this most of all. This fund could act in multiple ways. It could act as a credit guarantee fund for farm enterprises. It could act as an insurance pool to dip into. It could act as an incentive fund to encourage new technologies in the to address the whole challenge of climate change that is staring us in the face. So I won't go into detail, but that's my unasked for, unsolicited contribution to your list of radical ideas. And that also helps to wind up this session. And I'd urge all of you to think of FPOs, because we spend the late afternoon and evening discussing FPOs. Think of FPOs as micro enterprises. These are basically rural enterprises. And just like you are treating industrial or service sector enterprises and adopting the principles of aggregation, of networking, of supply chain integration, of vendor networks, let's apply the same to FPO networks. And through that, you get access to the individual farm household behind those individual members. Today, we accept at a global level that industrial supply chains need not all exist in one location. Even today, Maruti, your biggest car and most successful car production company, still imports 10 to 15% of its car parts. The critical gearbox is still not being made in India, right? Because we accept that certain technologies perhaps are more efficiently produced in some other geography. Similarly, I would look at these clusters of FPOs as potential SMEs or micro enterprises to be integrated into the larger food supply system. And Samanati is going to make a breakthrough this year and set up at least 2 joint ventures with FPOs. We're talking to some of the networks where we'd like to put skin in the game and create an integrated supply chain or value chain, just like Amul did for milk, or the sugarcane cooperatives have done for sugar. DCM is also a part example, but let's be honest that DCM is not perhaps passing back value because it's a different model, it's a corporate model, that's fine. I'm saying maybe there can be a separate company promoted by DCM or Cargill in collaboration with FPOs as shareholders, co-shareholders, where we are looking at a specific product or a specific kind of technology or a specific kind of product that we want to source from that particular geography. I believe that the way forward and the ultimate risk reduction and the ultimate risk mitigation is going to happen when we see this sort of value chain and supply chain integration. Otherwise, if everybody and somebody mentioned rightly that if you continue to work in silos, even as you try to address the risk of each individual silo, the overall risk is not going to be completely eliminated, and it will tend to rest disproportionately with the weakest agents in the system. That's inevitable. That's how markets operate. Markets are not moral creatures. They're simply creatures that follow. They allocate reward in direct proportion to the amount of leverage you have. So how do you give these guys at the end of the value chain some leverage? Because we all accept that you cannot treat a farmer like you treat, shall we say, a producer of bicycles. You can live without a bicycle, but you cannot live without this guy who's facing all the biotic, abiotic, and other life cycle risks, because that is actually life he's producing. He's not producing a product. He's producing things that give you and me life. So on this note, I'm going to close and leave these thoughts with you. I personally have learned so much, as I always do, listening to people from diverse backgrounds, and especially it's so wonderful to see so many bright young people thinking about these issues. One of the pleasures of getting a little older is that 20 years ago, I could not imagine a group like this discussing issues in agriculture. It would be some, boring old people like me, and maybe at best some agricultural scientists. But it's so wonderful to see bright young people with very open minds and different ways of thinking, contributing their thoughts and their experiences. So thank you, Satwa, for organizing a wonderful session. And thank you to all the panel members, both in the first panel and the second one, and to all the participants who patiently stayed with us till the end. It's been a wonderful, very great learning. I hope Satwa will put out a link to others who've not been able to join us today, but who can see the recording. Thank you again, and good night. Namaskar.
Thank you so much, and great thoughts from everybody. Thank you, everybody, panelists, participants, for coming in. It's great that you were able to make time on a Monday afternoon to actually spend some time and listen to this discussion and participate in it as well. If there are any queries, like we mentioned, please send these to this email ID, and we're happy to get back and put you in touch with the relevant folks that were there on this panel.